Hi and welcome to the Philosopher's Clearinghouse. Premium thought at a wholesale price. Let's think big things together. I'm your host, Calvinist Klein, a.k.a. Romans 918, a.k.a. the Singing Spurgeon. Today we have an essay by Joseph Rickaby on the moral philosophy.
Moral Philosophy by Joseph Rickaby. Section 4 of the Object of Perfect Happiness. Paraphrased for the Philosopher's Clearinghouse. As happiness is an act of the thinking mind, so the mind contemplates the object called happiness. As happiness is the subjective last end, so will this object, inasmuch as the contemplation of it yields perfect happiness, be the objective last end of people. As perfect happiness is conceptually possible, and intended by nature, so is this objective last end theoretically attainable, and should be attained, but attained by people in their current sinful state. Now, there is the difficulty.
That final end cannot be had in this life, and after death people are no more, for a soul out of the body is not a person in an important sense. Philosophy as study of nature can't speak about the resurrection of the body, for nature can make no inquiries concerning it. Rather, it is beyond nature, and a gracious gift of God in Christ. Philosophy deals only with the natural order, with people as people, leaving the supernatural order, or the privileges and status of people as children of God, to the higher science of scholastic theology. Had God so willed it, there might have been no supernatural end for sinful people at all. Philosophy shows the world as it would have been on that hypothesis. In that case, then, we would have been, as Aristotle represents, a being incapable of perfect happiness, but he who is man could have become perfectly happy in a state other than natural human life, that is, as a disembodied spirit. Peter is man. The soul of Peter, after separation, is no longer in that state, but it's not that Peter is one person, while his soul is another one. Rather, when they are together there is but one person, with one personal history and liabilities. The soul of Peter retains his identity, therefore the person Peter, or he who is Peter, attains to happiness, but the natural person Peter, a body and soul joined together in this life, does not attain it apart from the supernatural privilege of the resurrection. That's why Aristotle said, though he didn't grasp the fullness of his words, that man should aim at a life of happiness too good for him.
That state of happiness, the objective final end for people, is the final state of blessing that we yearn for when we strive for it. The soul thinks about all the beauty it perceives, the heights of truth, the expanse of goodness, and the mystery of love. She even sees herself in this, one pure spirit, but the soul desires to travel beyond this limited vision. She wants to be with others like her, to study, admire and interact with them, and live in the closest intimacy. That soul wants to explore all the secrets of reality to even the most distant star, reading the scientific laws of the universe together, thinking about science and art and everything in between, from fact to possibility, until at last she is overwhelmed by the vast intricacy of things that might be. This dear soul wants a single vantage point with which to think about all these things, some unifying perspective that brings it all intelligibly together, otherwise she is lost in a maze, incoherently unsatisfied. What is this thing for, and what is that, and for whom is it all meant? This is what the human mind thinks of in the present condition, and when the wonders are multiplied, the inquiry will grow only stronger, and people will be tormented in such a condition, unless they have answers to those questions. People just cannot leave theology alone. They will not be happy without a religious answer. Their contemplation wants to know not only about the nature, but about that which is beyond it. Is that God? It is nothing else. But God dwells in light inaccessible, where no creature, as such, can come near him, nor see him. The beauties of creation, as so many streams of tendency, meet at the foot of his throne, and there are lost. Their course is towards him, and is, so far as it goes, an indication of him. But he is infinitely, unspeakably above them. No person can arrive by their own natural perception to see him as he is, for mind can only discern what is proportionate to itself, and God is out of proportion with all the being of all possible creatures. It is only by analogy that the word being even makes sense as applied to him. As Plato says, the first good is not being, but over and beyond being, in dignity and power. To see God face to face, which is called the beatific vision, is not in itself a creaturely end. Things were not made for the purpose of seeing God in his fullness. However, the scriptures teach us that it is God's prerogative to invite men and angels to share his royal dinner table, and for him to fellowship with us. Scholastic theology goes further, but it is beyond natural philosophy. Like the resurrection of the body, and much more even than that, the beatific vision is part of the supernatural.
However, even in the natural, God turns out to be the last and final end for all things. The supernatural person sees God with the eyes of his soul, the way the natural person sees the faces of friends on earth. In the natural, the excellence of the unseen God comes together and ascends, as Plato described it, from the individual to the universal, from the bodily evident to the moral, from intellectual beauty in the creation until we reach an eternal, immutable, absolute and substantial beauty, upon which all others rest and find their being in. Our mind needs to travel to this final end, and unless it does, human thinking remains in tension, unresolved and incomplete. People need to think about the Alpha and Omega of all. Our mind desires to think of the very good of the good, high and beyond us, and beyond any thought of impurity, defect, or imperfection. We desire to rest upon the infinite object of such thought, even though we cannot comprehensively grasp its infinitude. We cannot, as finite, low, vulgar and muddy beings, think about this last, greatest, and best clean thing, this perfect spirit in whom is the center of our being and rest. We as creatures contemplate the beauty of God as but secondary reflections of the real thing. We ourselves do not obtain the essence of such divine light, but simply reflect it to some degree, like a mirror would. The beauty is not in us any more than it is in the mirror. Rather, beauty belongs to the thing being seen.
In putting God in the right place, as center and object of our very happiness, it's not that he is some cold, impersonal ice castle of beauty, nor is he our equal that we should call him dude, or buddy, or yo dog, or some other profane pejorative, that fails to recognize our creatureliness, and respect his holiness. Rather, this is our very kind Master, and our very good Lord, speaking to his servants behind clouds that, for our benefit, hide his face from us, a good Father who assures us of his abiding favor, and approving love, in Christ. It is not for us, as creatures, to go beyond the dignity of this holy separation, and put ourselves in God's high company, as his equal, and relate to him beyond the role of prince, or princess, of his royal love, failing to respect the honor his free grace bestows. For no one can look upon God, in any other way, than clothed in the righteousness of Christ, and live.
Thank you, Joseph Rickaby. For the Philosopher's Clearinghouse, this is Romans 9:18.